I was 17 when Ethan disappeared from my life. He was my older brother, just 2 years ahead of me, but it felt like he belonged to a different universe. Ethan was the kind of person who drew people in without trying. Funny, brilliant, reckless in a way that made him fascinating. I adored him, and I was used to him always being there, always somehow coming home no matter how wild the day had been. Then he left. No warning, no note, just a bedroom left untouched, his phone switched off, and silence so loud it swallowed everything. My parents tried to pretend it was temporary. My mother washed his sheets every week. My father sat at the dinner table longer than usual, always setting a fourth plate. But weeks turned to months, and months into a year. People stopped asking where Ethan had gone. We all crafted our answers. He's traveling. He's figuring things out. He's just taking a break. But the truth? We had no idea. The night he disappeared still plays in my mind like a movie reel I can't stop. We had fought, nothing serious, just the usual sibling nonsense. He had asked to borrow my headphones. I told him to get his own. He rolled his eyes and said something snarky. I told him I was tired of always cleaning up after his messes. It was petty, but it was the last thing I ever said to him, and I carried that like a weight. Year after year. My parents began to drift after that. My mom turned inward, her eyes always scanning the street outside, as if she was waiting to see him round the corner. My dad grew bitter, short-tempered. I buried myself in schoolwork and quiet routines. I didn't want to cause waves, not like Ethan had. By the time I was 20, I had stopped saying his name out loud. It felt like pressing on a bruise that would never fully heal. But he stayed with me. In every photograph I couldn't bring myself to take down. Every birthday dinner that felt hollow. Every late night when I wondered if he was safe, or warm, or even alive. I would walk through the city sometimes and imagine spotting him in a crowd. I'd see a guy with messy dark hair and my heart would leap before logic took over. I thought I had grieved. I thought I had moved on. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, as I stood in the kitchen making coffee, someone knocked on our front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My parents were out of town. The house was quiet, just me and the soft drip of rain on the windows. When I opened the door, my heart didn't leap. It stopped entirely. There, soaked from the rain, his hair longer, his frame thinner, but unmistakably him, stood Ethan, his eyes locked with mine, and everything I thought I had buried came rushing back. He didn't say anything at first, neither did I. The rain fell around us like time itself had paused, holding its breath. Ethan stood there, dripping on the welcome mat, looking older and worn in a way that hurt to see. His eyes, those same dark, mischievous eyes, held something unfamiliar now. Guilt, exhaustion, fear. "Hey," he said, voice hoarse, almost apologetic. I stared at him for another second before stepping back, wide-eyed. "Come in. You're soaked." He hesitated like he didn't quite believe I'd let him in. But then he stepped over the threshold, into the house we used to share, the home that had echoed with his absence for years. He looked around like it was a museum of memories. His gaze lingered on the staircase, the hallway photos, the worn edges of the rug we used to slide on as kids. I handed him a towel, unsure what else to do. "Do Mom and Dad know you're here?" He shook his head. "No. I wanted to see you first." That answer hit me like a punch to the chest. We sat at the kitchen table. I watched him wrap his hands around the mug I'd made for him, steam rising between us like a fragile truce. I waited. My heart thudded so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Where have you been?" I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. He looked down, ashamed. "Everywhere. Nowhere. I messed up. I didn't know how to come back." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to throw the mug across the room and demand to know how he could leave, how he could let us all drown in the questions he'd never answered. But I didn't. I just waited. He finally spoke. "I was 17. I thought I had everything figured out. I got mixed up with some people. Nothing dangerous, just stupid. I thought I was smarter than everyone. I thought I could disappear and no one would care." I flinched at that. "You think we didn't care?" "No," he said quickly. "I know you did. I was ashamed. And the longer I stayed away, the harder it got to come back." The kitchen clock ticked too loudly. He took a breath. "I lived out of my car for a while. Couch surfed. Tried to find work. Then I stopped trying. I ended up sleeping in shelters. I didn't want to reach out unless I had something to offer. Something to show I'd changed. But you didn't need to prove anything to come home," I whispered. He gave a bitter laugh. "Didn't I? After what I put you all through?" I wanted to cry. I wanted to hug him and hit him at the same time. "You should have come home," I said, voice breaking. "I know," he murmured. He pulled something out of his coat, folded papers, stained and creased. "I wrote you letters. I never sent them. I didn't have an address half the time, and when I did, I thought you'd hate me. I reached for the top one. My name was scribbled on the outside. I opened it, my hands trembling. Dear Jess, if you're reading this, it means I finally found a way to get it to you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I forgive myself, but I think about you every day. I remember how you used to wait up for me. I remember the last thing I said to you. I'm sorry I left like that. I'm sorry I hurt you. I couldn't finish it. Tears blurred the words. He looked down, ashamed. I thought I lost you, all of you. I wiped my face and stood. He tensed, expecting rejection. But I walked around the table and threw my arms around him. You're here now, I whispered. And I don't care how broken or messy it is. We're not losing each other again. For a long time, we just sat there in silence, the kind that heals instead of wounds. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside, something had shifted. The brother I thought I'd lost had come back, and with him, a chance to rebuild everything we thought was gone. The days after Ethan's return moved both too fast and too slow. We tiptoed around each other, still unsure if the fragile bridge we'd built could hold our weight. Every conversation felt careful, like a game of emotional Jenga. We were both afraid of pulling the wrong piece and watching everything collapse. But slowly, cautiously, we began to rediscover each other. He stayed in the guest room, though I knew it used to be Mom's sewing room, barely used since he left. She wouldn't mind. If anything, I knew her heart would leap to know he was back under this roof, even if she didn't know it yet. We decided to wait until the weekend to tell them. Ethan wasn't ready. I don't want to see disappointment in Dad's eyes, he said, avoiding my gaze. Not again. I didn't argue. I knew that fear too well, but we needed to do something with the days we had. We walked, for hours, through our neighborhood, past the school we both went to, the old park with the creaky swings. The familiarity was strange, like trying to wear shoes that almost fit but pinched in new places. I used to sit under that tree, he said one afternoon, pointing to a tall maple in the corner of the park, back when I was too scared to sleep in the shelter. I looked at him, surprised. That's only 10 minutes from here. He nodded. I know, I was close. Just not ready. The idea of him sleeping so near while we spent nights crying over not knowing where he was crushed me, but I didn't say that. He already carried enough weight. We talked more that week than we had in years. He told me about the people he met, both kind and cruel. The soup kitchens that offered more dignity than some homes. The strangers who saved his life with a warm blanket or a smile. There's a man named Lewis, he said one night. He used to work in finance, lost everything in the crash. He taught me how to survive without becoming bitter. What happened to him? I asked. He died last winter, cold night. He gave his coat to someone else who needed it more. That silence was the kind that hung in the chest. I didn't know what to say. But Ethan looked different after telling me that story. Softer. Like the pain he carried had shaped him into something deeper. We even laughed a few times. Real, spontaneous laughter that caught us off guard and made our eyes water. One afternoon, I dug up an old photo album. We sat cross-legged on the living room floor, flipping through pages of our childhood. Birthday cakes, scraped knees, family vacations where he always managed to photobomb. You were so annoying, I said, grinning as I pointed to a picture of him dumping a bucket of water on my head. He chuckled. I was the worst, but there was warmth in his voice now, a fondness that used to be missing. It wasn't all lighthearted. Some days were heavy. He still flinched at loud noises. Sometimes he didn't sleep through the night. Once I heard him crying quietly through the thin guest room walls. I didn't know if I should go to him or let him have his space. I chose silence, but I left a glass of water by his door the next morning. He didn't say anything, but I noticed the empty glass in the sink. The turning point came midweek when he asked, "Do you think they'll hate me?" "No," I said immediately. "They miss you so much. It's like every room in this house has been waiting." He looked down. "I want to believe that." "Then believe me," I said. "I was here. I saw it." He nodded, a quiet determination behind his eyes. Later that day, he made dinner. Pasta. Simple. But something he said he'd learned to cook while volunteering at a shelter kitchen. He moved around the kitchen with a quiet rhythm, as though reacquainting himself with a dance he'd once known. When we sat down to eat, it felt like a rehearsal for something bigger. "I want to stay," he said, voice low. I looked up. "I mean, not just here in the house. I want to start over. Really. Maybe get a job, take some classes." It felt like sunlight breaking through weeks of rain. "I'll help," I said. "Whatever you need." He looked at me, eyes shining. "You already are." That night, I wrote a letter to my parents. I didn't want to tell them over the phone. I wanted them to come home ready, not shocked. I told them Ethan was back, that he was different, that he was trying, that he was sorry. I didn't ask for their forgiveness. I asked for their chance to see him again. The next day, they called. They were coming home early. The morning my parents were due back felt like standing on the edge of something enormous. Ethan hadn't touched his breakfast. He kept pacing the hallway, tugging at the sleeves of a hoodie that was one size too big. His eyes were wild with nerves. "What if Dad doesn't say anything?" he asked. "What if he just walks past me like I'm not here?" I placed my hand on his arm. "Then we'll deal with it, together." He looked like he wanted to believe that. I spent the rest of the morning tidying things up, fluffing cushions, wiping counters that didn't need cleaning. Ethan tried helping, but I could see the tremble in his hands, the way he flinched at every sound outside. When we finally heard the car pull up, the air changed. It felt electric, like time had been waiting for this moment. Ethan stood in the hallway, frozen. "They're home," I said gently. "It's okay." He nodded, but his feet didn't move. The door opened. I saw Mom first. Her face was tired from the drive, her shoulders stiff from years of holding in pain. Dad followed, carrying a grocery bag, his expression unreadable. They stepped in, stopped short when they saw Ethan. Mom gasped. The bag slipped from Dad's hands. No one moved. Ethan looked like a boy again, terrified, ashamed, desperate for something he couldn't name. "Hi," he whispered. I'm sorry." Mom's eyes welled instantly. "Oh my God," she said, stepping forward. "Ethan." He flinched, but she didn't stop. She closed the space between them and wrapped him in the kind of hug that only a mother could give. Fierce, trembling, forgiving. He sank into her, sobbing. I turned away, tears hot on my cheeks. Dad didn't move. When Ethan finally looked up, he met Dad's eyes. "I know I hurt you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed to come home." There was a long pause. Dad stepped forward slowly, every line in his face tight with emotion. He stood in front of Ethan, fists clenched. "I'm angry," Dad said. His voice was low. "You disappeared. We thought you were dead. Do you know what that did to us?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, and I hate myself for it every single day." Another pause. Then Dad did something none of us expected. He pulled Ethan into a hug, not gentle, not slow, fierce and raw, and filled with years of pain and love colliding. "You came back," Dad whispered. "That's what matters." For the first time in years, our family stood in the same room, complete. But healing wasn't instant. The next few days were a mixture of small joys and painful truths. Dad had trouble looking Ethan in the eyes sometimes. Mom kept hovering, making sure he ate enough, slept enough, breathed enough. It was love, but it was also fear. Fear that he might vanish again. Ethan did his best. He helped around the house. He applied for a part-time job at a local bookstore. He offered to drive Mom to her appointments and even joined Dad in the garage one afternoon to fix a leaky faucet. But not everything went smoothly. One night, Dad raised his voice, really raised it, for the first time. "You think cooking dinner means everything's okay?" he barked when Ethan accidentally broke a ceramic dish. Ethan froze. I watched the color drain from his face. "I'm trying," Ethan said softly. "We're all trying," Dad snapped. "But you can't just waltz back in and expect it to be the same." The silence after that was brutal. Ethan left the kitchen and went straight to the backyard. I followed him, heart pounding. He was sitting on the old wooden swing, staring up at the sky. "I shouldn't have come back," he said. "He's right. I don't belong here." "You do," I said firmly. "But we're all figuring this out as we go. You were gone a long time, Ethan. That doesn't mean we don't want you here. It just means we're scared." He looked at me. "Scared of what?" "That it might happen again. That we'll love you and lose you all over." His shoulders slumped. "I won't run again." I believed him. The next day, something unexpected happened. Ethan's old friend Matt showed up at the door. He was hesitant, standing on the porch like a ghost from a different life. "I heard," he said. "I just wanted to see if it was true." Ethan stared at him. "Hey." Matt smiled awkwardly. "You look different." "I am different." They talked in the driveway for over an hour. I watched from the window as old friendships tried to mend. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. Still, not everyone was ready to move forward. At the grocery store, someone whispered behind our backs, "Isn't that the boy who disappeared? Didn't he get into drugs or something?" Ethan heard. I saw it in his eyes. The shame. The way his hands went to his sleeves, pulling them down. People didn't understand the story behind the scars, but we did. Back at home, Ethan sat down with Mom and pulled out the letters again. the ones he'd written over the years. He read one aloud. His voice trembled, but he didn't stop. It was raw, honest, heartbreaking. Mom held his hand. "You survived. That matters more than anything you did." It wasn't forgiveness in one moment. It was a promise to keep trying. And we all made it. Ethan started waking up earlier. He'd make coffee before anyone else stirred, sitting quietly on the back porch, watching the sunrise like it was teaching him something. A few weeks had passed since our parents returned, and while the air in the house still held tension, something had begun to shift. The storms were shorter, the silences less heavy. But the real change came the day of the community memorial. Every year, our town held a small gathering in honor of those who were lost to addiction, violence, or homelessness, a quiet affair at the park, with names read aloud and candles lit at dusk. Ethan had avoided it in the past. Even before he vanished, the topic was too close, too raw. But this time he asked me if we were going. "You sure?" I asked him, surprised. He nodded. "Yeah, I think I need to be there." We walked to the park just before sunset. A few dozen people stood in small clusters, murmuring quietly, holding candles. Familiar faces from school, church, and old neighbors gathered. Some people looked at Ethan with surprise. Others avoided looking at him at all. Still, he stood tall beside me. A local organizer stepped up to the mic and welcomed everyone. She read the names aloud, each one followed by a pause, the quiet weight of memory settling over the crowd. Then she asked if anyone wanted to speak. There was a hush, and then Ethan took a step forward. My breath caught. He walked up slowly, every eye tracking him. He held the mic like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "My name is Ethan," he began. His voice trembled, but it held. "Some of you knew me before. Some of you might have thought I was dead." No one moved. "I lived on the streets for nearly 3 years. I don't say that for pity. I say it because I know what it's like to be invisible, to walk past people and wonder if they even saw you, to feel like the world moved on without you." He paused, scanning the crowd. "I hurt people, my family, my friends. I thought I had to carry that guilt forever, but I came back, and I'm learning that coming back is its own kind of fight." A woman across the crowd wept silently. Ethan took a breath, voice firmer now. "If you've ever felt like you didn't deserve a second chance, please know that you do. And if you know someone who's struggling, don't wait to tell them they matter. You never know what one kind word can do." There was a beat of silence after he finished. Then, applause. Not loud, but sincere. A few people stepped forward to hug him. Others simply nodded, a quiet gesture of solidarity. Back at home, Dad pulled Ethan aside. I watched from the hallway, not wanting to intrude. They spoke in low tones, Dad's hand occasionally gripping Ethan's shoulder. When they finally embraced, it wasn't tentative. It was solid. Final. Forgiveness was no longer a fragile hope. It was real. A few days later, Ethan received a call from a shelter downtown. They'd heard about his speech. One of the volunteers, who'd also been there that night, recommended him for a part-time outreach position. He looked at the phone in disbelief. "They want me to help them talk to kids, like I used to be." "You should do it," I said. "But what if I mess it up?" "You already lived it. That's more than most can say." He took the job. On his first day, he wore a clean shirt, combed his hair, and practiced what he might say on the bus. He came back glowing, not because it had been easy, but because it had meant something. "They listened," he told me. "Really listened." Each step forward was met with a small moment of healing. Mom and Ethan began cooking together again, simple meals at first, like they used to when we were kids. I caught them laughing one afternoon, covered in flour, making the same cinnamon rolls we always had at Christmas. Dad invited Ethan to his weekend card game with the uncles. And I, for the first time in a long time, stopped worrying that he might vanish again. Then, one afternoon, while we were sorting old boxes in the attic, Ethan found something. A photo. Us, when we were little. I was around 7, missing a front tooth. Ethan was 10, arms slung protectively around my shoulder, grinning. He stared at it for a long time. "I forgot we were ever that close," he said quietly. "We still are," I replied. "We just had to find our way back." He looked at me, eyes full. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "You knocked on the door," I said. "That was everything." He smiled, and for the first time, it reached all the way to his eyes. The weeks that followed felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between hope and fear. Ethan's outreach job was thriving, but it exposed him to painful reminders of his past. He met young people caught in cycles of despair, some eager to change, others resistant, all bearing scars no one could see at first glance. One evening, after a long day at the shelter, Ethan came home late, exhausted but determined. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the TV. I found him sitting at the kitchen table, head in his hands. "Rough day?" I asked softly. He nodded. "I met a kid today, maybe 16. He reminded me of myself at that age. Lost, angry, scared. He told me he thought no one cared." I sat beside him. "And what did you say?" Ethan looked up, eyes shining with a fierce mix of pain and resolve. I told him I cared. I told him he wasn't invisible. It was a powerful moment. This man, once homeless and broken, now reaching out to save others from the same fate. But the past has a way of catching up. One afternoon, Dad and Ethan were working in the garage when the phone rang. Mom answered and then called us urgently to the living room. It was the hospital. Ethan's childhood friend, Matt, had been in a serious accident. Rushing to the hospital, a knot tightened in my stomach. Ethan's face was pale, eyes wide with fear. Matt had been his lifeline back then, the one who never judged, who believed Ethan could be more than his mistakes. In the sterile hospital room, Ethan stood silently beside Matt's bed, watching monitors beep steadily. Matt opened his eyes slowly, weak but alive. "I'm sorry," Matt whispered, "for everything I left behind." Ethan grasped his hand. "You're not alone. We're all fighting." That night, Ethan and I sat outside the hospital, wrapped in a blanket against the cold. He finally opened up about the darkest part of his journey, when loneliness pushed him to the brink. "I wanted to give up," he confessed. "I felt like I was drowning in the silence." "But you didn't," I said. "You fought. You're here." He smiled faintly. "Because someone believed I was worth fighting for. That someone was all of us, family, friends, and strangers touched by his courage." The next morning, Ethan received a letter, handwritten, fragile, yet powerful. It was from a teenager at the shelter, thanking him for his words, for giving them hope. Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he read. In that moment, I saw the man he had become, scarred but unbroken, filled with empathy forged by fire. That night, as we gathered around the dinner table, the house felt warm with renewed love and understanding. Dad raised his glass. To second chances. Mom smiled, tears glistening. To family. Ethan looked around, his voice steady. To never giving up. And in that moment, I knew that no matter how hard the past had been, the future was ours to shape. The days that followed Ethan's emotional breakthrough were quieter, but filled with purpose. Our family began to heal in ways we never thought possible. The walls that once echoed with silence and tension now reverberated with laughter and shared stories. Ethan continued his outreach work, becoming a pillar of hope for many in our community. His story inspired others to seek help and to believe in the power of transformation. Watching him grow, I realized that love had been his anchor all along, even when he was lost and alone. One evening, we gathered around the fireplace, the glow casting soft shadows on our faces. Ethan pulled out a small, worn notebook, the one he'd kept during his years on the streets. He flipped through pages filled with raw, honest reflections and sketches of dreams he once thought impossible. "I want to write a book someday," he said quietly, "to tell my story, not for pity, but to show that no one is beyond hope." I smiled. I'll be your first reader. We talked late into the night, sharing fears, hopes, and the lessons learned through pain and perseverance. Reflecting on everything, I understood the true meaning behind the title. He was homeless, but loved me like no one else. What I learned at 18 changed everything. It wasn't just about Ethan's journey. It was about the unbreakable bond between us. How love can reach beyond circumstances, how forgiveness can rebuild broken bridges, and how sometimes the greatest lessons come from the darkest places. At 18, I learned that people are more than their mistakes, that love can be fierce enough to save lives, and that sometimes the person you thought you lost forever is the one who teaches you what family truly means. Our story isn't just about homelessness or hardship. It's about resilience, about second chances, and about finding light in the most unexpected places. As Ethan looked at me with a grateful smile, I knew that what we'd been through had changed everything, not just for him, but for all of us. And that was a lesson worth every struggle.